Here's what the majority of people will never discover regarding Christmas: the date itself, the customs, even the festivities we hold sacred in our modern era. Nearly all of them actually did not originate as Christian traditions. In this documentary, we are going to follow a journey spanning 2,000 years, revealing how the 25th of December transformed from pagan festivals of antiquity into the heart of the Christian religious calendar. We will examine the role Rome played in this transformation, the layers added during medieval times that gave shape to the holiday, and the unexpected reality behind your Christmas tree, the practice of giving gifts, and yes, even Santa Claus, plus the reason why none of these elements initially had any connection whatsoever to the birth of Jesus Christ. If this corner of the internet seems like a space where you would enjoy settling in, please take a moment to like the video and consider subscribing, though only if you truly appreciate what I am creating here. As I always say, I would genuinely love to hear from you. Go ahead and introduce yourself down in the comments. Share with us where in the world you are watching from and what time it happens to be for you right now. This is our way of coming together around a shared fire, despite being miles and miles apart from one another. Thank you once again for joining me here today. So, without any further delay, let us begin. More than just a manger, Christmas makes its appearance each year with the same certainty as winter arriving. Families come together, lights begin to twinkle, children fill their dreams with thoughts of presents sitting beneath decorated trees. The 25th of December marks the calendar with recognition that spans the entire world, a date that is known across every continent and throughout countless cultures. And yet, hidden beneath this celebration that feels so familiar, lies a puzzle from history that has captured the fascination of scholars for many centuries. The Gospels written by Matthew and Luke tell us stories of shepherds and angels, of a star shining bright and wise men who arrived bearing gifts. They speak to us of Mary and Joseph, of a journey made to Bethlehem, of a child born who would go on to change the entire world. But if you search through these ancient texts as meticulously as you possibly can, you will discover no mention whatsoever of December, no reference at all to winter, no date given. This absence brings up questions that run deep. How did the birthday celebrated more than any other in all of human history come to settle on the 25th of December? The earliest followers of Jesus left behind no written record of commemorating the date of his birth. For these early believers, the resurrection carried far more significance than the nativity ever could. So where, then, did this Christmas date of ours actually originate? The answer winds its way through festivals held in Rome and calculations made by theologians, through conflicts between cultures and decisions made by ecclesiastical authorities. It tells us a story about adaptation and transformation, about traditions from ancient times that were reimagined and given new life. More than just a simple fact from history, the dating of Christmas shows us how communities of faith learn to navigate the complex relationship between culture and time. Some scholars will point to the Roman festival known as Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, which was celebrated on the 25th of December. Others follow intricate reasoning based on theology, rooted in beliefs regarding the date of Jesus' conception. Evidence from archaeology and writings from ancient times offer us clues, but no single document exists that proclaims outright, "We have chosen this date because." The journey toward understanding December 25th leads us down through the catacombs found in Rome, into the councils where bishops gathered, across the great divide that exists between Eastern Christianity and Western Christianity. We come across emperors and theologians, merchants and missionaries, each one playing their role in establishing the date that is now printed on billions upon billions of calendars all around the world. Beyond simple curiosity about history, this exploration sheds light on how religious traditions grow and evolve over time. The story of the 25th of December demonstrates that even those customs most firmly established have histories behind them. Histories that are often surprising, always deeply human, and perpetually fascinating. As we follow this narrative from ancient Palestine through imperial Rome, all the way to the Victorian parlors, where so many modern Christmas traditions actually took their shape, certain patterns begin to emerge. We observe how communities of faith respond to the cultures that surround them. Sometimes they resist, sometimes they absorb, and they are always adapting. The date of Christmas becomes like a lens, one through which we can examine 2,000 years of cultural exchange and development in religion. This history that has remained hidden actually enriches the meaning of the holiday rather than taking away from it. Understanding how the 25th of December became Christmas Day reveals just how dynamic living traditions truly are. It shows us how sacred stories discover new forms of expression across the centuries and throughout different civilizations. Tonight, we set out on this journey through history, not with the intention of challenging faith, but rather to deepen our appreciation. The story of December 25th reminds us that those traditions we think of as timeless very often have origins that are quite human. They develop through the choices people make and the chances that arise, through decisions made deliberately, and evolution that happens gradually. From the silence found in the Gospels to the global celebration that we recognize today, the path leading to December 25th winds through territory that might surprise you. Gods of the sun from ancient times, and theologians who calculated carefully, festivals held in winter, and calculations made in spring, all of these contribute threads to the rich tapestry that is Christmas history. As we explore each individual thread, please remember that history rarely provides us with answers that are simple. The establishment of Christmas on the 25th of December most likely resulted from multiple influences that converged across many centuries. Pressures from politics, reasoning based on theology, customs among the common people, and practical considerations all played their individual parts. This complexity actually makes the story richer, not less compelling. It reveals Christmas as a tradition that is alive, one that has grown and changed while still maintaining what is essential to its character. The date that we now consider completely inseparable from Christmas emerged through processes that are very human, processes of decision-making, debate, and gradual acceptance over time. So settle in as we travel through time, following the trail of evidence that leads us to December 25th. Along this journey, we will meet characters who are absolutely fascinating and encounter connections that will surprise you. We will see how a date that Scripture never mentioned became one of the most widely recognized days in all of human culture. More than simply dates and facts, this exploration gives us insight into how traditions take form and then transform. It sheds light on the ongoing dialogue that exists between faith and culture, between truths from ancient times and the ways we express them in contemporary life. The history of December 25th is, in the end, a story that is profoundly human, one about communities seeking to honor what is sacred within the rhythms of time here on earth. The two gospel narratives, Luke in contrast to Matthew. The storytelling of Jesus' birth comes down to us through two voices that are distinct in the New Testament. Luke and Matthew, writing their accounts decades after the events they are describing, offer the only biblical accounts we have of the Nativity. And yet, these two narratives, while both are precious to tradition within Christianity, tell stories that are remarkably different from one another. Luke's Gospel presents the version that is most familiar to us from Christmas pageants and carols. Here is where we find Mary and Joseph making a journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem because of a census that was ordered by Caesar Augustus. The journey proves to be difficult for Mary, who is heavily pregnant. When they arrive, they search for a place to lodge, but discover no room available at the inn. The child comes into the world and is laid in a manger, which is a feeding trough used for animals. That very same night, according to what Luke tells us, shepherds are watching over their flocks in fields nearby. All of a sudden, an angel makes an appearance, bringing news of great joy to them. A multitude of hosts from heaven join together in praise, and the shepherds rush to Bethlehem. They discover the baby lying exactly as it had been described to them, there in a manger. After they see him, they go out and spread the word about what they have witnessed. Luke's account breathes with a simplicity that is humble. Shepherds represented some of the very lowliest members within society, people who were often considered witnesses who could not be relied upon in Jewish law. Yet to these humble shepherds, the announcement from heaven comes first. The setting speaks to us of poverty and displacement, a stable that was borrowed, a cradle that was makeshift, visitors who carried the smell of sheep and field with them. Matthew tells an entirely different tale. His narrative does not begin with a journey, but rather with a genealogy, one that traces the lineage of Jesus through David all the way back to Abraham. Mary is discovered to be pregnant, and Joseph, who is described as a man who is righteous, makes plans to divorce her in a quiet manner. An angel appears before him in a dream, providing explanation about the divine origin of the child and giving him instruction to take Mary as his wife. The birth itself receives only a brief mention in Matthew's account. Instead, the focus makes a shift to visitors who are mysterious, coming from the east. These magi, who are often referred to as wise men, follow a star that guides them first to Jerusalem. They inquire of King Herod, asking where they might find the newborn king of the Jews. Herod, who is troubled by this question, seeks consultation with scholars of religion who point toward Bethlehem based on prophecy from ancient times. The star makes another appearance, providing guidance to the Magi to the house where they discover the child, together with Mary. They present gifts consisting of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, substances that are precious and suggest royalty, divinity, and mortality. After receiving warning in a dream not to return to Herod, they leave by taking another route. Matthew's account continues with elements that are darker, elements that are absent from Luke's telling. Herod, who is furious at having been deceived, gives orders for the elimination of every male child in Bethlehem who is under 2 years old. Joseph, having been warned by yet another angelic dream, flees together with Mary and Jesus to Egypt. They stay there until the death of Herod occurs, then make their return to settle in Nazareth. These two accounts do share certain elements that are core to the story. Mary as the mother, Joseph serving as earthly guardian, the birth taking place in Bethlehem, divine intervention that comes through angels. And yet, the differences prove to be equally striking. Luke places emphasis on humility and immediacy. The birth happens while they are on a journey, and the announcement is made to shepherds who are nearby. Matthew presents a timeline that is more extended, with the Magi arriving perhaps months or possibly even 2 years following the birth. Most crucially for the investigation we are conducting, neither gospel provides markers related to time. Luke makes mention of a census under Quirinius, who was governor of Syria. But the census of Quirinius that we know about occurred in 6 CE, which is years after the death of Herod in 4 BCE, and this creates a puzzle regarding chronology that is significant. Matthew makes reference to the reign of Herod, which came to an end in 4 BCE according to what most historians tell us. These references help to establish a time frame that is general, but they offer no date that is specific and no indication of season. The silence extends even further than this. Neither account makes mention of weather that is cold, though imagery of Christmas across the centuries might lead us to have that expectation. The shepherds out in fields actually suggest a season that is different, as winter would typically see flocks being brought to shelter. Neither narrative gives indication of how old Jesus was at the time when the Magi made their arrival, though the order from Herod that targeted children up to 2 years old implies that some passage of time had occurred. Celebrations of Christmas in modern times blend together elements from both of the Gospels. Nativity scenes position shepherds and Magi together, though the texts suggest that they arrived at separate times. We sing about 3 kings, though Matthew never provides a number for the Magi and never calls them kings. Tradition derives the number 3 from the 3 gifts that are mentioned. This foundation in the texts matters because it demonstrates what the earliest sources from Christianity did preserve and what they did not preserve. The writers of the Gospels, who were concerned with significance that is theological more than detail that is biographical, felt no need whatsoever to record the date of the birth of Jesus. For these writers, The meaning of the event far outweighed where it might be placed on a calendar. Both of the evangelists write with purposes that are clear, purposes that transcend the simple recording of history. Luke places emphasis on the care God has for those who are humble and outcast, presenting a Savior whose birth receives its first announcement to shepherds. Matthew underscores the royal lineage of Jesus and the fulfillment of prophecy from the Hebrews, showing even sages who are Gentile recognizing the King who has been newborn. These priorities that are theological shaped what each author chose to include and what they chose to omit. Neither one showed interest in preserving the kind of data that is biographical, the kind that modern readers might have expectation of. The date of birth, which is so crucial to how we celebrate birthdays now, held no importance that was apparent for the writers of the Gospels or for their audiences in the immediate sense. This absence speaks with great volume about the priorities of early Christianity. Believers in the first century focused their attention on the teachings of Jesus, his death, and his resurrection. The circumstances surrounding his birth mattered primarily as they provided revelation about his identity and his mission. When during the year that birth occurred seemed irrelevant when compared to what it meant for all of humanity. As Christianity began spreading beyond its origins in Judaism into the world of Greco-Roman culture, new questions started to arise. Converts arriving from various backgrounds brought with them different expectations and frameworks related to culture. Some came from traditions that held celebrations for divine births and cosmic cycles. The silence of the Gospels about the birth date of Jesus would, in time, create space for new traditions to develop and grow. And yet, for at least the first century following Jesus, those who followed him felt no need whatsoever to fill this silence. They gathered together to break bread, in remembrance of his death and his resurrection. They shared his teachings with one another and expected his return to come, but they left behind no evidence of celebrating his birthday or even wondering when that birthday might have been. This foundation from Scripture, or perhaps the lack of one, sets the stage for developments that would come later. The Gospels provide narrative that is rich and meaning that is theological while remaining silent on specifics related to chronology. That silence would, in time, be filled, but not for generations yet to come. The journey from the narratives of the Gospels to December 25th would prove to be long and winding, shaped by factors that the evangelists could never possibly have imagined. The early church's silence, a date that was forgotten. For nearly 2 centuries following the time when the Gospel accounts were written down, Christians showed interest that was remarkably little in celebrating the birthday of Jesus. This silence speaks with more volume than any proclamation ever could, revealing differences that are fundamental between sensibilities that are ancient and those that are modern regarding religion. Communities of early Christians gathered in homes and in spaces that were hidden, breaking bread in remembrance of the Last Supper. They observed the Sabbath. They celebrated Passover, but with new meaning attached to it. And increasingly, they honored the first day of the week as the Day of the Lord, commemorating the resurrection. But the month of December brought with it no observances that were special, no festivals for the Nativity, no celebrations of birthdays for their Savior. This absence was not something accidental, nor was it due to knowledge that had been lost. Rather, it reflected choices that were deliberate and theological. Origen of Alexandria, who was one of the most influential theologians during the 3rd century, explicitly addressed celebrations of birthdays in his writings. He made note that in Scripture, only those who were sinners, people like Pharaoh and Herod, celebrated birthdays. Saints and prophets, he observed, marked no such occasions. According to the reasoning of Origen, celebrations of birthdays belong to culture that is pagan, not to practice that is Christian. He argued that Scripture only recorded the birthdays of sinners, people like Pharaoh and Herod, not of those who were saints. This statement reveals just how foreign the idea of commemorating birthdays seemed to thought in early Christianity. They associated festivals of this kind with pomp that is earthly and excess that is pagan, not with devotion that is spiritual. The focus of the early church remained firmly on death and resurrection rather than on birth. Dates of martyrdom were preserved with care and commemorated. Communities would gather annually to remember when their heroes of faith had been born into life that is eternal through death. These birthdays that are heavenly mattered far more than those that are earthly. Considerations that are practical reinforced this stance that was theological. During periods when persecution took place, which came in waves all throughout the first 3 centuries, Christians made survival and essential practices their priority. Developing a festival that was elaborate for the birthday of Jesus would have seemed frivolous at a time when believers faced imprisonment or even death simply for gathering together to worship. Furthermore, the early church wrestled with questions that were fundamental about the nature of Jesus. Was he fully human, fully divine, or some combination of the two? These debates related to Christology consumed energy that was enormous and generated writings that were extensive. Within discussions of this kind, the exact date of the Incarnation seemed less pressing than understanding what the Incarnation actually meant. Some writers from early Christianity did engage in speculation about when Jesus might have been born, but their musings aimed at insight that is theological rather than planning that is liturgical. Clement of Alexandria, writing around the year 200 CE, made mention of various dates that had been proposed by different groups. Some said the 20th of April, others said the 20th of May. He noted these discussions with interest that was academic but showed no concern whatsoever for establishing observance that was official. The roots of Christianity and Judaism also influenced this early silence. Tradition within Judaism at the time did not place emphasis on celebrations of birthdays the way that culture in Greece and Rome did. The Hebrew Bible records very few birthdays, and literature that is rabbinical from later periods showed ambivalence toward observances of this kind. Christians in the early period, many of whom came from backgrounds that were Jewish, inherited this framework related to culture. As Christianity began spreading westward into territories that were Greek and Roman, it came into contact with cultures that did celebrate birthdays, especially for gods and for emperors. Religions of mystery that were popular in the Roman Empire often centered on the births, deaths, and rebirths of figures who were divine. And yet, rather than immediately adopting these patterns, Christians initially defined themselves in opposition to practices of this kind. This resistance formed part of a larger pattern of distinctiveness among Christians. Believers in the early period sought to separate themselves from culture that was pagan, surrounding them in dress, in diet, in entertainment, and in worship. Refusing to celebrate birthdays, even the birthday of Christ, marked them as different from their neighbors who honored the dates when gods and Caesars were born. Tertullian, the theologian from North Africa who was fierce, exemplified this stance of separatism. Writing in the early part of the 3rd century, he condemned participation by Christians in festivals and customs that were pagan. He would have been appalled at the very thought of creating an alternative that was Christian to celebrations of birthdays that were pagan. For Tertullian and others who thought like him, accommodation of this kind represented compromise that was dangerous. And yet, even as theologians preached separation, ordinary Christians lived their lives surrounded by festivities that were pagan. The calendar of Rome overflowed with holidays that were religious, celebrations for gods of various kinds, anniversaries that were imperial, festivals related to seasons. Christians could not entirely escape this environment that was festive. They conducted business with those who were pagan, sometimes attended celebrations of family that were pagan, and witnessed the spectacles that were public and marked holidays that were religious. This tension between separation and accommodation would, in time, contribute to change. As the 3rd century moved forward, Christianity grew from a minority that was persecuted to a presence that was significant in many cities. What worked for a community that was small and embattled might not suit a movement that was larger and more established. By the late part of the 3rd century, shifts that were subtle began to appear. Art from Christians in the catacombs began depicting scenes of the Nativity, not as objects for commemoration that was dated, but as statements that were theological. These images proclaimed the Incarnation without suggesting any observance related to the calendar. They showed that while Christians did not yet celebrate Christmas, they were increasingly contemplating the mystery of birth that was divine. The silence about the birthday of Jesus also allowed for strategies in missionary work that were flexible. As Christianity spread to regions that were new, evangelists could focus on beliefs that were essential without immediately challenging every custom that was local. The absence of a date for the nativity that was fixed meant one less conflict that was potential with traditions related to indigenous calendars. Interestingly, while avoiding celebrations of birthdays, Christians in the early period developed methods that were sophisticated for calculating dates of significance that was theological. They debated when Easter should be observed, creating formulas that were complex based on cycles that are lunar and solar. This shows they possessed both the ability and the inclination to establish dates on the religious calendar when they deemed it important to do so. The fact that they did not apply energy of this kind to dating the birth of Jesus reinforces how peripheral this concern remained for them. Easter, the celebration of resurrection, demanded timing that was precise because it connected to Passover and to history related to salvation. The Nativity, as beautiful and meaningful as it was, did not require precision related to chronology in their understanding. As the 3rd century came to an end, however, changes were looming on the horizon. The Empire of Rome faced crisis and transformation. Religions of mystery gained popularity that was increasing. Christians found themselves competing for converts in a marketplace that was religious and increasingly complex. The separatism that was simple from generations earlier grew harder and harder to maintain. Moreover, as theology within Christianity developed and spread, new questions began to arise. If God truly became human in Jesus, should not this event that is cosmic merit celebration? If those who were pagan honored the birthdays of their gods with enthusiasm of this kind, did not restraint among Christians suggest their God was less worthy of honor? These questions, which would have been unthinkable to Origen, would soon be demanding answers. The silence of the early church about December 25th, indeed about any celebration of a birthday for Jesus, thus reveals a movement that was religious, confident in its distinctions, focused on its message that was essential, and unconcerned with competing festival for festival with culture that was surrounding. This would change in a manner that was dramatic in the century to come. But understanding the starting point helps us appreciate the magnitude of that transformation that would occur. The Roman rival, Saturnalia and Sol Invictus. As autumn faded away into winter in Rome during ancient times, the city underwent transformation. The month of December brought not reflection that was quiet, but celebration that was raucous, as two festivals that were great dominated the time of year when it was darkest. Understanding these celebrations that were pagan, Saturnalia and Sol Invictus, provides context that is crucial for the eventual emergence of Christmas on December 25th. Saturnalia began on the 17th of December and officially lasted through the 23rd, though celebrations very often stretched longer. This festival honored Saturn, the god of agriculture, who was associated with an age that was mythical and golden, an age of abundance and equality. For 1 week in time, society in Rome turned upside down in chaos that was organized, chaos that both thrilled and troubled those who observed it. During Saturnalia, slaves dined together with masters, sometimes even being served by them. Gambling, which was normally restricted, became open and legal. Citizens abandoned the toga in favor of clothes for dinner that were colorful. Gifts flew between friends and members of families. Candles to chase darkness away, figurines made of clay for luck that was good, and treats of every variety imaginable. The phrase "Io Saturnalia" rang out through streets as hierarchies that were social temporarily dissolved. Work ceased completely, schools closed their doors, courts shut down, and even executions were postponed. The demeanor of Rome that was usually stern gave way to atmosphere that was like carnival. Seneca the Younger complained about all the noise, writing that the whole of the city had gone mad. He tried to maintain composure that was philosophical, while surrounded by revelry, but admitted the nature of the celebration that was infectious. The equality that the festival provided on a temporary basis carried appeal that was deep for the orders in society that were lower. Slaves could speak in a manner that was free, gamble in the open, and enjoy a taste of freedom that was brief. Masters played along with this, understanding that this valve for safety helped maintain order for the rest of the year. Some Romans, who were wealthy, found the reversal of roles amusing. Others fled to estates in the country until things returned to normal. Feasting formed the heart of Saturnalia. Banquets that were elaborate stretched through the nights. Foods that were special made their appearance. Pork that was roasted, wine sweetened with honey, fruits that were exotic. Romans, who normally practiced moderation, abandoned their restraint. Pliny the Elder, who was conscious of diet, noted with disapproval how his countrymen gorged themselves, though evidence suggests that he participated as well. The giving of gifts during Saturnalia followed protocols that were elaborate. Martial, the poet who was witty, wrote verses that were satirical about the stress involved in selecting presents that were appropriate. Patrons who were rich expected gifts that were clever from clients. Friends exchanged tokens expressing affection. Children received toys and sweets. The aspect that is commercial of Christmas in modern times has precedent that is ancient in markets in Rome during December. Rituals that were public accompanied celebrations that were private. The statue of Saturn, normally bound with strips made of wool, was symbolically freed for the duration. Priests performed sacrifices while crowds offered their cheers. Some communities elected a Saturnalicious princeps, a king who was mock and who issued commands that were playful that others had to obey. This lord of misrule embodied the inversions of the festival. While Saturnalia dominated the middle part of December, the 25th held significance of its own. This date marked Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the sun that is unconquered. Unlike the roots of Saturnalia that are ancient, Sol Invictus represented innovation that was imperial and relatively recent. Officially promoted by the Emperor Aurelian in the year 274 CE, the cult of Sol Invictus synthesized deities related to the solar that were worshipped across the empire. Worship of the sun from Syria, mysteries that were Mithraic, and religion that was traditional to Rome merged in this cult that was imperial. Aurelian, after victories in military campaigns in the east, established the god as patron supreme of power that was Roman. He built a temple that was magnificent, created a college of priests that was new, and instituted games that were quadrennial. The selection of December 25th for Sol Invictus carried significance that was astronomical. Near the solstice in winter, Romans could observe the return of the sun, with days beginning to grow longer after reaching their point that was shortest. The sun that was unconquered had survived its descent that was deepest and begun climbing back towards strength that is associated with summer. This victory that was cosmic demanded celebration. Sol Invictus appealed in a particular way to soldiers and to emperors. Standards used by the military bore symbols related to the solar. Coins depicted emperors who were crowned with rays that were solar. The connection between light that is divine and power that is imperial became ideology that was explicit. Constantine, before his conversion took place, honored Sol Invictus on coins and on monuments. The god represented order triumphing over chaos, light conquering darkness. The tendencies toward monotheism of the cults related to the solar also merit our attention. While not exclusive, Romans still honored deities that were other. Sol Invictus increasingly stood supreme in propaganda that was imperial. Some scholars see this trend that is henotheistic as preparing the ground for monotheism that is Christian. The transition from honoring the sun that is unconquered to worshipping the sun of righteousness proved smooth both linguistically and conceptually. People who were common celebrated December 25th with complexity that was less philosophical. They lit bonfires to encourage the return of the sun. Decorations that were evergreen appeared: holly, ivy, and laurel, symbolizing life persisting all through winter. Candles blazed in windows throughout the city. Families gathered for meals that were festive. The day marked the renewal of hope as the cycle of nature turned towards spring. These festivities in December created the ocean of culture in which Christianity swam by the 4th century. As Christians grew in number and in influence, they could not ignore the celebrations surrounding them on every side. Neighbors invited them to parties for Saturnalia. Associates in business expected exchanges of gifts that were seasonal. Children wondered why their families did not join festivities that were public. Some Christians did participate, causing concern to arise among leaders of the church. Tertullian had warned against joining in celebrations that were pagan, but his separatism that was strict grew harder to maintain as Christianity continued to spread. How could Christians engage with society while avoiding compromise that was religious? This question gained urgency as revelries in December dominated life that was public. The attractions of these festivals went beyond mere fun and enjoyment. Saturnalia offered vision of equality that was social, a vision that resonated with teaching from Christianity about all being equal before God. Sol Invictus celebrated light conquering darkness, imagery that echoed metaphors that are Christian. The festivals addressed needs that are genuinely human. Bonding of community during winter that is dark, hope for light that is returning, release that is temporary from constraints that are social, and yet dangers lurked in accommodation of this kind. The revelry of Saturnalia often turned to behavior that was debauched. Gambling, drunkenness, and license that was sexual accompanied the reversals of roles. The associations that were imperial of the cults related to the solar troubled Christians who had suffered persecution under emperors who worshipped the sun. Participating in these festivals might imply acceptance of their content that was religious. Leaders of the church faced a dilemma that was genuine. Prohibition that was absolute risked alienating converts and limiting efforts at evangelism. Accommodation that was total threatened the distinctiveness of Christianity. Some path that was middle was needed, a way to address the needs that were human. These festivals met while maintaining integrity that was theological. Communities of Christians that were different developed responses that were varying. Some maintained separation that was strict, creating gatherings that were alternative for believers during the season of festivals. Others allowed participation that was limited, accepting invitations to parties while avoiding elements that were explicitly religious. Still others began discussing whether meanings that were Christian could be attached to customs that were seasonal and familiar. The stage was set for transformation to occur. The festivities in December on the calendar of Rome had created expectations and patterns that would not simply disappear. The challenge facing Christianity in the 4th century was how to respond to practices related to culture that were embedded deeply. Could festivals that were pagan be conquered and converted in the way temples that were pagan could be? Or would accommodation lead down a path to corruption? As Christianity moved from minority that was persecuted to favor that was imperial under Constantine, these questions demanded answers that were practical. The dilemma of December, how to handle Saturnalia and Sol Invictus, would contribute in a manner that was significant to the development of Christmas. The rivals from Rome had established December as a time of light, of giving gifts, and of celebration. Whether through competition or through transformation, Christianity would need to address this reality related to culture. The calculated choice. The hypothesis regarding history of religions. The transformation began in Rome during the 4th century. As Constantine legalized Christianity and favor that was imperial replaced persecution, leaders of the church faced challenges that were new. Among them was how to handle the pull that was magnetic of the festivals that were pagan in December. The explanation that is most popular among scholars for December 25th, known as the hypothesis regarding history of religions, suggests a strategy that was deliberate of replacement and redemption. According to this theory, authorities from the church in Rome consciously selected December 25th to provide an alternative that was Christian to Sol Invictus. Rather than forbidding participation in celebrations that were popular in a manner that was futile, they offered something better. The birth of the true Son of Righteousness, as the prophet Malachi had described the Messiah who was coming. This substitution that was strategic would let Christians celebrate while maintaining purity that was theological. The calendar that is Philocalian, from the year 354 CE, contains what may be our evidence that is earliest and firm for Christmas on December 25th, with the entry possibly dating to around the year 336 CE. This almanac that was illustrated lists festivals that are Christian alongside dates that are traditional to Rome. Under December 25th, it notes simply Natus Christus in Bethlehem Iudaeae, Christ born in Bethlehem of Judea. The entry that is matter-of-fact suggests a practice that was already established rather than innovation that was new. Documents from the Church from this period reveal the creativity that was theological employed to justify the date. Writers who were Christian drew parallels between Christ and imagery related to the solar throughout Scripture. Had not Malachi prophesied about the Sun of Righteousness rising with healing in its wings? Did not the Gospel of John describe Jesus as the light coming into the world? The connection seemed ordained divinely. Ambrose of Milan, writing in the late part of the 4th century, made these connections explicit. He called Christ the sun that is true, the sun that penetrated the darkness that is profound of the underworld and shone with the splendor of light that is new. Language of this kind deliberately echoed and exceeded worship that was pagan and solar. Why honor the sun that is created when you could worship its creator? The theory regarding substitution gained support from how smoothly celebration that was Christian mapped onto customs that were existing. Like devotees of Sol Invictus, Christians could speak of the victory of their deity over darkness. The turning point that is astronomical of days that are lengthening provided metaphor that was ready for the dawn of salvation. Habits that were existing of celebration in December needed only redirection that was theological. This process, sometimes called enculturation by scholars who are modern, appears throughout the history of Christianity. Missionaries often found success by adapting rather than attacking customs that were local. Just as temples that were pagan became churches and deities that were local became saints, December 25th could shift from Sol Invictus to the Mass of Christ. The date remained constant in its position. Only its meaning changed. Pope Leo I, preaching in the 5th century, revealed tensions that were ongoing in this transformation. He scolded Christians who still bowed to the sun that was rising before entering the Basilica of St. Peter. Clearly, habits that were old died hard. His sermon shows both the success and the incompleteness of the strategy of substitution. While Christmas had officially replaced Sol Invictus, some worshippers hedged the bets they were making. The calculation that was Roman involved more than simple replacement. Leaders of the Church infused December 25th with meaning that was rich and theological, meaning that surpassed anything in tradition that was mythological. The Incarnation, God becoming human, represented significance that was cosmic beyond any birth, that was divine and mythological. This was not merely another birthday for a god, but the word that is eternal, entering time. Evidence that is artistic supports the hypothesis regarding substitution. Sarcophagi that are Christian and paintings in catacombs from this period increasingly depicted Christ with attributes that are solar, rays of light emanating from his head, imagery of dawn and sunrise. These choices that are artistic suggest appropriation that was deliberate of symbolism that was solar and familiar for purposes that are Christian. The strategy extended beyond Rome to other places. As Christianity spread through the empire, December 25th provided whether converts came from worship of the sun that was Syrian, mysteries that were Mithraic, or religion that was traditional to Rome, they could find elements that were familiar reinterpreted in Christmas. The universality of symbolism related to the solar made this particularly effective. Critics of Christianity in its early period noticed and mocked these parallels. The Emperor Julian, who attempted to restore belief that was pagan, pointed out similarities between claims by Christians about Jesus and myths about deities that were solar. Rather than deny these parallels, apologists who were Christian like Augustine argued that myths that are pagan contain glimpses that are distorted of truth fully revealed in Christ. The similarities proved not borrowing by Christians, but anticipation that was pagan. The strategy regarding substitution also addressed needs that were social and practical. Romans expected celebration in late December. Bonds that are social were renewed through feasting and giving gifts. By establishing Christmas, the Church provided outlet for these expectations related to culture within framework that was Christian. Converts need not abandon all customs that were familiar, only their associations that were pagan. Factors that are economic likely influence the decision as well. Markets in December geared toward gifts for Saturnalia could serve shoppers for Christmas equally well. Merchants who depended on trade that was seasonal would not resist a religion that maintained their base of customers. The infrastructure that was commercial of festivals that were pagan transferred to use by Christians in a manner that was seamless. And yet the hypothesis regarding history of religions faces some challenges of its own. No document that is surviving from the 4th century explicitly states, "We chose December 25th to counter Sol Invictus." Fathers of the Church who justified the date in a manner that was theological never admitted calculation that was strategic. This silence might reflect discretion. Acknowledging borrowing from practices that were pagan in the open would undermine claims of uniqueness that is Christian. Furthermore, correlation does not prove causation to have occurred. That Christmas emerged on the date of Sol Invictus might reflect coincidence rather than strategy. Perhaps calculations that were theological independently led to December 25th, with parallels that are solar proving fortunate but unplanned. The record that is historical allows for interpretations that are multiple. Some scholars make note that communities of Christians had grown large enough by the 4th century to create momentum of their own. Rather than needing to accommodate beliefs that were pagan, the Church possessed power that was cultural and sufficient to establish practices that were independent. From this perspective, December 25th represents assertion of confidence that is Christian rather than accommodation to pressure that was pagan. The theory regarding substitution also assumes, perhaps too much so, strategy that was calculated among leaders of the Church. Development that is religious often occurs through evolution that is gradual rather than decisions by committee. December 25th might have emerged through interactions that were complex between practice that was popular and recognition that was official rather than decree from the top that went down. Despite these qualifications, the hypothesis regarding history of religions remains compelling for several reasons. The timing seems too convenient for coincidence to explain. Christmas appearing just as Christianity gained support that was imperial and needed to address festivals that were pagan. The imagery related to the solar adopted by art and rhetoric that is Christian appears deliberate. The transfer that was smooth of customs from context that is pagan to context that is Christian suggests accommodation that was intentional. Moreover, this explanation aligns with strategies from Christians that are known from the period. The 4th century saw conversions of temples on a scale that was massive, absorption of concepts that were philosophical, and adaptation of imagery that was imperial for use by Christians. Claiming December 25th fits this pattern that is larger of appropriation that is creative. The Church showed ability that was remarkable to baptize elements that were pagan into service that is Christian. The genius of this strategy, if strategy it was, lay in transformation rather than in substitution that was mere. Christmas did not simply replace Sol Invictus, it exceeded and transformed it completely. The birth of Christ carried implications that no myth that was pagan could match. God entering history that is human surpassed any story of appearance that was divine. The light that is true outshone all rivals that existed. This process took generations to reach completion. Throughout the 4th and 5th centuries, celebrations that were pagan and celebrations that were Christian existed side by side, sometimes blending in ways that troubled authorities within the Church. But gradually, December 25th became exclusively associated with the birth of Christ. The transformation succeeded in a manner so thorough that most Christians eventually forgot the associations of the date that were pagan entirely. By choosing December 25th, whether through strategy that was calculated or development that was providential, the Church accomplished goals that were multiple. It provided Christians with celebration that was communal during the season that was festive. It redirected impulses that were religious and existing toward ends that were Christian. It demonstrated the ability of Christianity to fulfill and transcend yearnings that were pagan. The promise of the solstice, in winter of light that is returning, found expression that was ultimate in the light of the world. The theological calculation, the hypothesis regarding calculation, While the theory regarding substitution offers narrative that is compelling, another explanation for December 25th emerges from the mathematics that are mystical of thought in early Christianity. This hypothesis regarding calculation suggests the date arose not from accommodation that is strategic, but from reasoning that is theological, about symmetry that is cosmic, and perfection that is divine. The foundation rests on a belief that is ancient, called the concept of integral age. Some thinkers who were Jewish and from early Christianity held that prophets who were great entered and left the world on the same date on the calendar. Their lives formed circles that were perfect, demonstrating harmony that is divine. This principle, when applied to Jesus, would generate conclusions regarding chronology that are surprising. Christians in the early period believed unanimously that Jesus died on Passover, though they debated the date that was precise. Tradition in the West placed the crucifixion on the 25th of March, while churches in the East calculated the 6th of April. These dates became points that were fixed in chronology that is Christian, anchoring all other calculations. The imagination that was theological of Christians in the early period then made a connection that was profound. If Jesus died on the 25th of March, might not this date also mark another moment that was crucial in a cosmos governed by symmetry that is divine? Perhaps the Word became flesh, on the same date on the calendar that the Word departed flesh. The 25th of March could mark both ending and beginning. But which beginning are we speaking of? Here, thought in early Christianity took a turn that was decidedly philosophical. The moment of incarnation, when divinity entered humanity, occurred not at birth, but at conception. The Annunciation, when Mary accepted the message from the angel, represented the beginning that was true of history related to salvation. The Word that is eternal became flesh that is embryonic at that instant. This move that was theological had implications that were practical. If Jesus was conceived on the 25th of March, then gestation that is normal for humans would place his birth 9 months later on the 25th of December. The calculation required no reference whatsoever to festivals that were pagan, no thinking that was strategic about accommodation related to culture. Reasoning that was purely theological led directly to the date. Sextus Julius Africanus, writing in the early part of the 3rd century, provides some of the evidence that is earliest for calculations of this kind. His works regarding chronology, though surviving only in fragments, show scholars who were Christian already computing dates based on principles that were theological rather than memory that is historical. The approach treated Scripture as encoding harmonies that are mathematical, harmonies awaiting discovery. The calculation that is parallel of the Church in the East reinforces this hypothesis. Starting from the 6th of April for the crucifixion, they placed conception on the same date, leading to birth on the 6th of January. Epiphany. This explains why Christianity in the East initially celebrated Nativity and baptism together on the 6th of January, before later adopting December 25th for birth, while retaining the 6th of January for baptism and the visit of the Magi. Augustine of Hippo endorsed this method of calculation in a manner that was explicit. Writing in the early part of the 5th century, he stated that Jesus was conceived on the 25th of March, on which day also he suffered. The bishop showed no awareness whatsoever of competing with festivals that were pagan. For him, the date emerged from logic that was theological about perfection that is divine and order that is cosmic. This method of calculation reflects patterns that are broader in thought from early Christianity. The fathers of the Church delighted in finding patterns that are numerical and symmetries in Scripture and in history. They calculated genealogies, interpreted numbers that are prophetic, and sought harmonies that are mathematical, revealing the plan of God that is ordered. December 25th fit perfectly into this worldview. The concept of integral age itself deserves examination that is closer. Why would thinkers from ancient times assume prophets died on their dates of birth or conception? The idea seems to reflect beliefs that are deep about justice that is cosmic and completion. A life that is perfect should form a circle that is perfect in time. Providence that is divine would not allow dates that are random for transitions that are so significant. This thinking appears in sources that are rabbinic discussing Moses, who, according to tradition, was born and died on the same date, the 7th of Adar. The pattern extended to figures from the Bible that are other, creating an expectation that dates held meaning that was special for calculating the dates of Jesus. If Moses and other prophets exhibited symmetry of this kind, surely the Messiah would display perfection that is even greater. The hypothesis regarding calculation also explains certain anomalies better than the theory regarding substitution does. Why did some churches in the early period celebrate the birth of Christ on dates other than December 25th? If the goal was simply countering Sol Invictus, dates that are alternative make little sense. But if communities that are different performed calculations using dates for Passover that were varying, results that are diverse naturally follow. Moreover, this theory explains why sources from the early period discussing December 25th often focus on arguments that are chronological rather than polemic, that is, anti-pagan. Writers like John Chrysostom defended December 25th by discussing records regarding census and times for travel. Not by attacking worship of the sun. Their arguments suggest derivation that is mathematical rather than substitution that is strategic. The emphasis on conception over birth also reflects priorities from early Christianity that are authentic. The mystery of the Incarnation centered on the Word becoming flesh. The moment of conception, when nature that is divine united with nature that is human. Birth merely manifested what had already occurred. This emphasis that is theological supports schemes for dating based on conception rather than nativity. And yet, the hypothesis regarding calculation faces challenges of its own. The concept of integral age, while documented, was not held universally. Many texts that are Jewish and Christian show no awareness of this principle. Building a system that is entire and chronological on this foundation seems precarious. Would reasoning that is so abstract really determine practice that is liturgical? Furthermore, the date of crucifixion on the 25th of March itself resulted from calculation rather than certainty that is historical. Methods that are different yielded results that are different, suggesting the system that is entire rested on interpretation rather than fact. If the date that is anchor was uncertain, all calculations that are subsequent became equally questionable. Critics also note the convenience that is suspicious of December 25th emerging from these calculations just when Christians needed an alternative to Sol Invictus. Perhaps the method of calculation provided cover that is theological for a decision that was fundamentally strategic. Fathers of the Church could defend the date on grounds that are abstract while practically achieving accommodation that is cultural. The relationship between theories regarding calculation and substitution need not be exclusive in a mutual way. Perhaps calculations that were theological suggested a date that proved advantageous in a manner that was strategic. Providence that is divine might work through coincidence that is mathematical. The Church could simultaneously honor reasoning that is theological and necessity that is practical. Some scholars propose that both processes operated in communities that were different. Christians who were Roman, surrounded by festivities of Sol Invictus, might have chosen December 25th in a manner that was strategic. Meanwhile, communities in the East arrived at the 6th of January through calculation. Standardization later on December 25th could reflect influence that is Roman rather than calculation that is universal. The appeal of methods of calculation to minds from ancient times should not be underestimated. In an era before methods that are scientific and historical, mathematics seemed reasonable in a manner that was perfect. If Scripture encoded truth that is divine, why not truth that is chronological as well? The search for patterns that are hidden and harmonies that are cosmic characterized life that is intellectual across cultures. This approach also offered advantages over investigation that is historical. Determining the date of birth of Jesus that is actual would require records unlikely to survive, but calculation that is theological needed only principles that were established and dates that are anchor that were accepted. The abstraction of the method became its strength, providing certainty where evidence that is historical failed. The concept of integral age connected to themes that are broader about perfection and completion. Christ as the Adam who is new should exhibit symmetry that is even greater than the first. His life should demonstrate the order that is divine, disrupted by sin but restored through redemption. Precision that is mathematical in dating reinforced claims that are theological about restoration that is cosmic. Whether December 25th emerged through calculation, substitution, or some combination of the two, the result carried meaning that is profound. The date linked to points that are cosmic in turning, solstices and equinoxes, reinforcing the claim of Christianity to significance that is universal. The light of the world arrived as light that is physical began returning. Time that is theological aligned with time that is astronomical. The hypothesis regarding calculation ultimately reveals sophistication that is intellectual of Christianity in its early period. These were not people who were simple, accepting dates that were arbitrary, but theologians seeking harmony that is cosmic. Their methods might seem foreign to minds that are modern, but the impulse to find meaning in patterns that are temporal remains human in a manner that is deep. In seeking to date what cannot be dated, they created tradition that is enduring. The clash and confluence. Christmas in opposition to paganism. The establishment of December 25th marked a beginning, not an ending. For centuries after Rome officially recognized Christmas, the struggle between celebration that is Christian and custom that is pagan continued. This clash, sometimes violent, often subtle, always complex, shaped the holiday that we know today. John Chrysostom, preaching in Antioch around the year 386 CE, reveals the tension that was ongoing. He defended December 25th in a manner that was vigorous, but acknowledged that many Christians still participated in festivities for New Year that were pagan just a week later. His sermons alternate between argument that is theological and pleading that is practical, urging his congregation to separate themselves from revelry that is non-Christian. The problem ran deeper than conflicts related to calendar. Customs that were pagan had evolved over millennia to meet needs that are human, marking change that is seasonal, strengthening bonds that are social, providing release that is psychological during months of winter that are dark. Simply declaring December 25th as the birthday of Christ did not automatically transfer these functions to the holiday that was new. The transformation required generations of negotiation and adaptation. Councils of the Church throughout the 4th and 5th centuries issued canons that were repeated against participation by Christians in festivals that were pagan. The frequency that is vary of these prohibitions reveals their ineffectiveness. The Council of Trullo in the year 692 still found it necessary to forbid Christians from wearing masks, dressing in a manner that is cross-gender, or invoking Dionysus during the making of wine. Clearly, habits that were old persisted centuries after conversion that was official. And yet, alongside prohibition that was official, absorption that was informal occurred. Decorations that were evergreen, so prominent in festivals that were Roman in winter, gradually appeared in contexts that were Christian. Authorities of the Church initially resisted. Tertullian had mocked wreaths made of laurel as nonsense that is pagan. But eventually theologians who were creative found meaning that is Christian in greenery that is perpetual, seeing symbols of life that is eternal through Christ. The traditions of giving gifts from Saturnalia proved particularly resilient. Fathers of the early Church, like Gregory of Nazianzus, complained about the expense and excess of presents that are seasonal. But rather than successfully eliminating the practice, Christianity eventually sanctified it. The gifts of the Magi to Christ provided precedent that is biblical. Charity toward those who are poor became an expression that is Christian of generosity that is seasonal. The sermon of Martin of Braga, De Correctione Rusticorum from the 6th century, provides a window into persistence that is rural of practice that is pagan. He describes Christians who honored Thursday, the day of Thor, by refusing to work, who placed wreaths made of laurel on their animals, who practiced divination on the day of New Year. His frustration speaks across centuries. Conversion that was official had not reached deep into practice that is folk. The strategy shifted from prohibition to reinterpretation. Unable to stop people from bringing greenery indoors in December, leaders of the Church explained it as representing the wood of the cross or the crown of thorns. Candles, essential to festivals that were pagan in winter, became symbols of Christ as light of the world. Even the Yule log, clearly an origin that is pre-Christian, received meaning that is Christian as representing the cross or the warmth of love that is divine. This process of reinterpretation created layers of meaning that enriched Christmas while troubling those who were purists. A bishop in the 6th century might bless the same bow that is evergreen, his predecessor, had condemned a century earlier. What changed was not the object itself, but its significance that is assigned. Form that is pagan received content that is Christian. Variations that are regional complicated the picture further. In territories that were Germanic, where influence that is Roman arrived filtered through missions that were Christian. Customs that were local in winter merged with Christmas in ways that were unique. The wild hunt, a procession that is terrifying in midwinter of spirits, gradually transformed into figures that are more benign and bring gifts. Deities that were local did not simply disappear, but underwent makeovers that were Christian. The element of feast proved particularly contentious. The gluttony of Saturnalia directly contradicted virtues that are Christian of moderation and charity. Yet, fasting in December proved unpopular and arguably cruel during the scarcity of winter. Compromise emerged. The fast of Advent would prepare for feasting at Christmas. Excess became acceptable if preceded by restraint and accompanied by charity. Attitudes among the clergy varied considerably. Some priests, especially in areas that were rural, pragmatically accepted mixture that was considerable and pagan in customs for Christmas that were local. Others maintained opposition that was strict. Caesarius of Arles preached in a manner that was fierce against Christians who observed omens on the day of New Year or gave presents shaped like figures that are human, holdovers from Saturnalia that were clear. Yet even he could not stem the tide entirely. The elements that were theatrical of festivals that were Roman in winter, reversals of roles, kings who were mock, inversions that are social, found expression that was new in customs from Christmas in medieval times. The Lord of Misrule, clearly descended from the king who was temporary in Saturnalia, appeared in contexts that were Christian. Chapters of cathedrals elected bishops who were boys for the season. These customs worried authorities, but proved too popular to suppress entirely. By the 8th century, Bede could write about customs in December with anxiety that was less than his predecessors. While maintaining correctness that is theological, he showed curiosity about practices that were pre-Christian rather than condemnation that was mere. This approach, that is scholarly, studying rather than simply denouncing beliefs that were pagan, marked a phase that was new in confidence that is Christian. The controversies regarding iconoclasm of the 8th and 9th centuries affected customs related to Christmas. Those opposed to imagery that is religious worried that trees that were decorated and scenes of the Nativity veered toward idolatry. Those supporting icons saw representation that is visual as incarnational. God, having taken form that is visible, justified expressions of faith that are material. Practices related to Christmas became battlegrounds that are theological. Raids by Vikings and invasions brought challenges that were fresh. Paganism from Scandinavia arrived just as customs that were Germanic had achieved domestication that is Christian. The process repeated itself. Conflict that was initial, accommodation that was gradual, reinterpretation that is creative. The oak of Thor became the tree of Christmas. The ride of Odin in midwinter influenced traditions regarding Santa Claus that were developing. The capitularies of Charlemagne revealed struggles that were ongoing. He legislated against fortune-telling on the day of New Year, suggesting the practice remained common among his subjects who were Christian. Yet he also promoted celebration of Christmas as force that is unifying in his empire that was diverse. Unity that is political required commonality that is religious, even if achieved through interpretation that is flexible. The synthesis achieved by the Middle Ages that were high represented neither victory that is purely Christian nor survival that is pagan, but fusion that is creative. Christmas had become capacious enough to absorb elements that are diverse while maintaining identity that is Christian. Theologians might debate interpretation that is proper, but believers who are ordinary celebrated with syncretism that is unconscious. This quality that is layered made Christmas resilient but also controversial. Protestants in the era of Reformation would attack many customs from Christmas in medieval times as corruptions that are pagan. Puritans would attempt to ban the holiday entirely. These conflicts that came later reflected tensions that were unresolved from the encounter that was earliest of Christianity with festivals in winter. And yet the elements that worried those who were purists. The trees, gifts, feasts, and revelry gave Christmas its power that is emotional. By absorbing rather than simply rejecting customs that were pagan, the holiday addressed needs that are deep and human that theology that is pure might miss. The darkness of winter called for light, warmth, and community. Christmas provided all three. The clash between Christmas and beliefs that were pagan thus produced not victory for either side, but transformation of both. Customs that were pagan gained meanings that were new, meanings they never possessed originally. Theology that is Christian found expression through practices that are material it initially rejected. The confluence created something that is genuinely new, neither purely Christian nor pagan, but distinctively Christmas. East meets West, the connection to the 6th of January. While Rome settled on December 25th, Christians in the Mediterranean, that is Eastern, charted a course that was different. Their choice of the 6th of January for celebrating the appearance of Christ on earth reveals traditions that are alternative and priorities that are theological that would eventually merge with practice that is Western, creating the season of Christmas that is expanded that we know today. The Feast of Epiphany, meaning manifestation or appearance, emerged in the East by the early part of the 3rd century, predating evidence that is firm for Christmas in the West. Christians who were Egyptian particularly championed this date, connecting it to traditions that are ancient about the solstice of winter in their calendar that is regional and the blessing of the waters of the Nile. For Christians in the East, the 6th of January originally encompassed revelations of divinity that are multiple: the birth of Christ, the visit of the Magi, his baptism in the Jordan, and even the miracle of the wedding at Cana. This richness that is theological reflected the emphasis of Christianity in the East on theophany, the appearance of God to humanity, rather than the focus in the West on incarnation specifically. Clement of Alexandria, writing around the year 200 CE, provides evidence that is early for calculations related to the 6th of January. He notes that followers of Basilides commemorated the baptism of Christ on this date, calculating from their understanding of when the ministry of Jesus began. The connection between baptism and birth reflected logic that is theological. Both marked entrance that is divine into the sphere that is human. The method of calculation in the East paralleled yet differed from approaches in the West. Starting from the 6th of April as the date of the Passion, theologians in the East arrived at the 6th of January for the Nativity through their own reasoning regarding integral age. This convergence that is independent on dates in winter through mathematics that is theological suggests impulse that is deep in Christianity to place the birth of Christ in the season of light that is returning. The influence of Egypt proved crucial in establishing the 6th of January. Christians who were Egyptian connected the date to traditions that were local about the solstice of winter and the flooding of the Nile, events associated with renewal and blessing that is divine. The transformation of water into wine at Cana resonated with beliefs about properties of the Nile that are miraculous. These connections eased conversion in Egypt while enriching symbolism that is Christian. As the 4th century progressed, East and West became aware of their practices that were different. This might have created conflict, but instead sparked curiosity and convergence that is gradual. Sermons of John Chrysostom from Antioch in the year 386 CE document this process. He advocates for adopting December 25th, while acknowledging that many churches in the East still preferred the 6th of January. The arguments of Chrysostom reveal the complexity of negotiations regarding calendar. He claims December 25th has support that is better and historical, citing records of census and calculations regarding travel. But his need to argue in a manner so vigorous suggests resistance that is significant. Many Christians in the East saw no reason to abandon their date that is traditional for an innovation that is Roman. The solution that is theological proved elegant. Rather than choosing between dates, the Church would use both. December 25th became the Feast of the Nativity specifically, while the 6th of January retained its association with the visit of the Magi and the baptism of Christ. This division of celebrations allowed both traditions to persist while creating a season that is liturgical and richer. Jerusalem played a role that is pivotal in this synthesis. Egeria, a pilgrim from the west visiting around the years 381 to 384 CE, describes liturgies in Jerusalem that are elaborate, that still celebrated the Nativity on the 6th of January. Yet by the 6th century, Jerusalem had adopted December 25th for birth, while maintaining the 6th of January for other theophanies. The practice of the city that is holy influenced churches throughout the Mediterranean that is Eastern. The 12 days between December 25th and the 6th of January acquired significance that is special through this merger. What might have been confusion regarding calendar became opportunity that is liturgical. The celebration that is extended allowed contemplation that is fuller of the mysteries of the Incarnation. Each day could focus on aspects that are different of the manifestation of Christ to the world. Armenia provides the exception that proves the rule. The Church that is apostolic and Armenian maintains the 6th of January for the birth of Christ to this day, never adopting December 25th. Their persistence demonstrates that the date in the East was not simply practice that is primitive, awaiting correction from the West, but a tradition that is valid with integrity that is theological and its own. The story of the Magi found resonance that is particular with the 6th of January. These figures, who are mysterious from the East, following signs that are astronomical to find the King who is newborn, symbolized recognition by Gentiles of Christ. Their journey from East to West paralleled the mission of the Church that is own and expanding. Churches in the East naturally felt connection that is special to these Easterners who were fellow and who first recognized the Messiah. The blessings of water for Epiphany remain distinctively Eastern. On the 6th of January, Christians in the East blessed rivers, lakes, and seas, commemorating the baptism of Christ. In places like Constantinople and Alexandria, these became celebrations that are civic and major. The patriarch would throw a cross into the water, and men who are young would dive to retrieve it. Such customs had no parallel in the West. The emphasis in the East on baptism alongside birth reflected priorities that are theological and different. Christmas in the West focused on the word becoming flesh, the humility of the Incarnation. Epiphany in the East celebrated power that is divine revealed in the star guiding the Magi, in the Spirit descending at baptism, in water becoming wine. Both aspects mattered, but preferences that are regional shaped emphasis. Poetry that is liturgical from this period reveals the richness that is emotional both dates inspired. Hymns from Ephraim the Syrian for Epiphany overflow with paradox and wonder. The Creator entering creation, the infinite becoming infant, water recognizing its master at baptism. These meditations that are poetic shaped understanding among the people more than treatises that are theological. The synthesis of dates also affected development that is musical. As East and West exchanged practices that are liturgical, they shared traditions that are musical. The singing that is antiphonal and characteristic of liturgy in the East influenced music for Christmas in the West. Hymns that are Byzantine found translations in Latin. The season of 12 days provided opportunity that is expanded for elaboration that is musical. Communities that are monastic often led in adopting practices that are synthesized. Monks devoted to prayer that is liturgical and open to traditions that enrich worship readily embraced both December 25th and the 6th of January. Their offices, that are daily during the 12 days, created patterns that are elaborate of reading, singing, and contemplation that influenced practice in the church that is wider. Routes for trade facilitated convergence regarding calendar. As merchants moved between Constantinople and Rome, Alexandria and Antioch, they carried customs that are liturgical alongside goods that are material. A trader from Syria might describe customs for Epiphany to colleagues who are Roman. A pilgrim from Egypt might learn about December 25th while visiting Jerusalem. Commerce created exchange that is cultural. The dimension that is political deserves attention as well. As Constantine and his successors sought empire that is Christian and unified, standardization that is liturgical served interests that are imperial. Celebrating the birth of Christ on dates that are different suggested disunity. The convergence that is gradual on December 25th for Nativity, with the 6th of January retained for celebrations that are related, provided compromise that is acceptable. By the 6th century, most of Christendom had achieved synthesis regarding calendar. December 25th marked the beginning of celebration focused on the Nativity itself. The 12 days following allowed meditation on aspects that are various of incarnation. The 6th of January concluded with focus on the Magi and baptism. This season, that is extended, satisfied sensibilities both Western and Eastern. The merger created benefits that are practical beyond harmony that is theological. In societies that are agricultural, celebration that is extended in winter fit rhythms that are natural. Late December through early January marked a pause in work on the farm. Festivities that are extended strengthened bonds of community during the period of the year that is darkest. The structure of 12 days provided framework for celebration that is sustained without excess. This synthesis between East and West reveals the capacity of Christianity for adaptation that is creative. Rather than imposing uniformity that is rigid, the Church found ways to honor traditions that are diverse while maintaining unity that is essential. The connection to the 6th of January enriched December 25th, creating a season more complex and meaningful than either date alone could provide, inventing tradition, trees, Santa, and carols. The journey from debates that are theological and ancient to imagery of Christmas that is modern spans centuries of invention that is creative. Innovators from medieval times and Victorian times transformed a feast that is religious into the spectacle that is sensory, we now consider traditional. These customs that are supposedly ancient often prove surprisingly recent. Their quality that is timeless was carefully crafted by people who are specific in moments that are particular. The path of the tree for Christmas to prominence illustrates this process in a manner that is perfect. While those who were pagan indeed brought greenery indoors during festivals in winter, the tree that is fir and decorated as centerpiece for Christmas emerged in Germany during medieval times. Chronicles from guilds from Freiburg in the year 1419 mentioned trees decorated with apples, wafers, gingerbread, and tinsel. These trees of paradise, representing Eden, appeared in plays that are mystery performed on the 24th of December, the day of the feast of Adam and Eve. Reformers who were Protestant initially viewed trees for Christmas with suspicion, associating them with excess that is Catholic. Yet regions that were Protestant in Germany ultimately championed the custom. Martin Luther allegedly decorated a tree with candles to recreate starlight through branches for his children. This story, first recorded centuries later, likely represents desire that is Protestant to claim the tradition rather than fact that is historical. Whether true or legend, the story reveals desire among Protestants to claim the tradition while purifying its meaning. The tree remained largely Germanic through the 19th century. Prince Albert, consort of Queen Victoria, who is German, popularized trees for Christmas in Britain in the 1840s. An illustration from the year 1848, showing the family that is royal gathered around their tree, sparked imitation that is widespread. What had been curiosity that is foreign became tradition that is essential to Britain within a generation. Americans proved equally receptive. Immigrants from Germany had brought trees to Pennsylvania, but adoption that is wider awaited, transmission that is cultural. Godey's Lady's Book, the magazine for women that is influential, reprinted the illustration that is royal in the year 1850, carefully removing the crown of Victoria to make it appear American. By the year 1870, trees for Christmas stood in parlors from Boston to San Francisco. The transformation of Saint Nicholas into Santa Claus represents another tradition that is invented with genealogy that is complex. The Nicholas that is historical, Bishop of Myra in the 4th century, became saint who is patron of children through legends about giving gifts in secret. Celebrations from medieval times of his day of feast, the 6th of December, included visits that are nocturnal, leaving treats for children who are good. Regions that were Protestant, rejecting cults of saints, needed bringers of gifts who are alternative. The Christkindl, Child of Christ, served Protestants in Germany. The Netherlands retained Sinterklaas, despite objections that are Calvinist. These figures that are varied would eventually merge in ways that are unexpected through synthesis that is American. The History of Knickerbocker, by Washington Irving from the year 1809, introduced Saint Nicholas to literature that is American as a burgher from Dutch, who smoked a pipe. This figure, who is comic, bore little resemblance to the bishop who is austere but captured imagination that is American. Irving invented details that became canonical: entrances through chimneys, stockings by the fireplace, visits in December. The poem of Clement Clarke Moore, A Visit from Street, Nicholas, from the year 1823, added elements that are crucial. The sleigh, 8 reindeer who are named, the belly that shook like jelly. Moore, a scholar who is biblical and who initially published in a manner that is anonymous, created imagery that is enduring through verses that are simple, meant for his children. His Saint Nick was an elf who is jolly and old, distinctly non-religious but benevolent. The illustrations for Christmas by Thomas Nast for Harper's Weekly, particularly from the year 1863 to 1886, gave Santa his form that is visual. The cartoonist for the Civil War depicted Santa supporting troops from the Union, establishing him as icon that is American. Nast added the workshop at the North Pole, the list of children who are good and bad, the letters to Santa. His illustrations that are annual for Christmas created vocabulary that is visual, still used today. Interests that are commercial seized these elements, standardizing and spreading them. Stores that are department installed Santas for Christmas by the 1890s. Campaigns for advertising for Coca-Cola in the 1930s, painted by Haddon Sundblom, finalized the image of Santa. Suit that is red, beard that is white, warmth that is grandfatherly. The bishop had become ambassador for brands. Carols for Christmas underwent transformation that is equally dramatic. Carols from medieval times were originally songs for dance, often with themes that are secular. The word derives from the French carol, a dance that is circle. These songs that are vernacular provided alternative to liturgy that is Latin, allowing participation that is popular in celebration that is seasonal. The Reformation that is Protestant initially diminished singing of carols, viewing it as frivolous. Hymns that are congregational replaced carols that are folk in many regions. Yet the impulse that is musical proved irrepressible. Lutherans in Germany developed the tradition of chorale, creating hymns for Christmas that are rich in theology, vom Himmel hoch, and compositions that are similar balanced doctrine with melody. The era that is Victorian witnessed revival and invention of carols. Clergymen who are Anglican, inspired by ideals from the Oxford movement, collected and published carols that are traditional before they vanished. John Mason Neale translated hymns that are Latin and ancient, like Good King Wenceslas, adding lessons that are moral and Victorian to melodies from medieval times. Simultaneously, carols that are new and traditional appeared. Silent Night, composed in Austria in the year 1818, spread globally within decades. O Little Town of Bethlehem, written by rector from Philadelphia, Phillips Brooks, in the year 1868, immediately seemed ancient. The genius that is Victorian lay in creating antiquity that is instant. Songs that are new, that felt old in a manner that is timeless. Singing of carols as practice that is public required organization that is Victorian. Choirs of churches had always sung, but caroling in the community needed structure. The tradition that is Victorian of caroling from door to door, often for charity, formalized customs of wassailing that are older. Books of song that are printed, standardized repertoire. What seemed expression of community that is spontaneous actually required coordination that is careful. These traditions that are invented succeeded through meeting needs that are genuine. The tree for Christmas provided point that is focal for gathering of family and beauty that is visual during darkness in winter. Santa Claus offered magic that is benevolent in society that is industrializing. Carols created community through song that is shared. Each innovation addressed anxieties that are modern through practice that is seemingly ancient. The era that is Victorian proved particularly creative because it faced challenges that are particular. Industrialization disrupted communities that are traditional. Growth that is urban separated families. Doubt that is religious troubled faith. Traditions related to Christmas, however recently invented, provided stability and continuity. They created antiquity that is artificial in times that are changing rapidly. Roles related to gender shaped these inventions in a manner that is significant. The tree for Christmas entered homes through sphere that is domestic and female. Magazines for women spread advice regarding decorating. The angel on the tree reflected ideals that are Victorian of purity, that is feminine. Santa Claus, conversely, embodied generosity and authority that are masculine. Carols allowed participation that is public and mixed within bounds that are proper. Dynamics related to class also mattered. Families from the middle class adopted customs that are aristocratic, like trees for Christmas, while adding emphasis that is bourgeois on children and domesticity. Celebrations by the working class maintained elements that are more raucous despite efforts by reformers. The Christmas that is traditional that emerged blended elements from strata that are social and various. Variations that are national developed even as traditions spread in a manner that is international. Pudding for Christmas in Britain never conquered America, which preferred cookies. Markets for Christmas in Germany found little purchase in France. Scenes of the Presepe, nativity that are Italian, remained distinctly Mediterranean. Each nation selected and adapted elements that resonated in a manner that is local. Technology accelerated invention of tradition. Railways enabled gatherings of family and delivery of gifts. Lighting by gas made celebrations in evenings safer. Printing that is mass spread songs and stories. Photography captured and transmitted scenes of Christmas that are idealized. Each innovation seemed to recover practice that is ancient, while actually creating possibilities that are new. By the year 1900, most elements now considered traditional had crystallized. Trees that are decorated, mythology regarding Santa Claus, repertoire of carols that is standardized. These inventions succeeded in a manner so thorough that Christmases from earlier times seemed impoverished by comparison. Who could imagine Christmas without elements unknown to centuries that are previous? The process of invention continues today. Technologies that are new generate traditions that are fresh. Specials that are televised, greetings by email, shopping that is online. Each generation adds layers while claiming to preserve customs that are timeless. The Christmas that is traditional remains creative in a manner that is dynamic, constantly reinventing itself while asserting authority that is ancient. The mosaic that is modern, from sacred to secular and back again. The 20th century witnessed Christmas transformed into phenomenon that is global, transcending boundaries that are religious. What began as commemoration that is theological became juggernaut that is cultural, incorporating memory that is sacred, engine that is commercial, ritual related to family, and celebration that is secular. Understanding Christmas in modern times requires examining how these elements interact, clash, and ultimately create meaning for billions worldwide. The transformation that is commercial accelerated after the First World War. Stores that are department had featured displays for Christmas since the 1870s. But the 1920s saw marketing that is systematic of the season for shopping during the holiday. Macy's first sponsored its parade for Thanksgiving in the year 1924, explicitly launching commerce for Christmas after Thanksgiving. The Friday that follows Thanksgiving gradually became the start that is traditional of shopping for Christmas, eventually earning the name Black Friday in the 20th century that is late, as retailers moved from ink that is red to black through sales during the holiday. This commercialization troubled leaders who are religious across denominations. They watch day that is holy and spiritual become extravaganza that is retail. Yet attempts to put Christ back in Christmas often proved futile. The forces that are economic unleashed proved stronger than sermons. By century, that is mid, sales in retail during December determined survival for the year that is annual for many businesses. Hollywood added influence that is powerful. White Christmas from the year 1942 by Irving Berlin, an immigrant who is Jewish, became one of the singles that are best-selling of all time, defining sound for Christmas for generations. Films like It's a Wonderful Life from the year 1946 and Miracle on 34th Street from the year 1947 created scripture that is secular, teaching values related to Christmas through entertainment rather than church. These products that are cultural performed functions that are religious for society that is increasingly secular. They preached generosity, reconciliation within family, and belief in wonder. The Redemption of George Bailey and the Vindication of Kris Kringle offered narratives of salvation stripped of theology that is explicit. Media that is mass became ministry for those who never entered churches. The era following the Second World War saw Christmas achieve dominance that is cultural and unprecedented. Developments that are suburban featured houses designed for display related to Christmas. Television brought celebration that is standardized into every home. Perry Como and Bing Crosby created soundtrack for season that is sacred but secularized. Christmas became religion that is civil for America, exported globally through influence that is cultural. And yet beneath glitter that is commercial, communities that are religious maintained countercurrents. Advent gained emphasis that is renewed as period of preparation contrasting with frenzy that is commercial. Mass at midnight remained powerful for many, offering alternative that is contemplative to excess that is material. Communities that are Hispanic brought traditions of Las Posadas, enriching practice that is American. Churches that are Orthodox in the East maintain dates in January, preserving alternatives that are ancient. The counterculture of the 1960s challenged conformity related to Christmas. Critics attacked manipulation that is commercial and pressure that is social. Christmas that is white seemed less appealing amid war in Vietnam and conflict that is racial. The question from Charlie Brown that is plaintive. Isn't there anyone who knows what Christmas is all about? Expressed disillusionment that is widespread. The response from Linus that is biblical offered one answer among many. Globalization created dynamics that are new. Japanese adopted Christmas as holiday that is romantic, without content that is Christian. Factories in China produced decorations for export that is worldwide, while officially discouraging observation that is religious. Countries that are Islamic debated whether Muslims could acknowledge Christmas. Communities that are Hindu in India incorporated elements while maintaining identity that is distinct. Technology continually reshaped celebration. Lights that are electric replaced candles, eliminating hazard from fire while enabling displays that are elaborate. Specials on television became viewing that is required, creating moments that are cultural and shared. Email and media that are social transformed customs of sending cards. Shopping that is online revolutionized logistics related to gift giving. Each innovation altered practice while claiming to preserve tradition. Consciousness that is environmental brought perspectives that are fresh. Critics questioned consumption that is mass and waste. Trees that are living replaced ones that are cut in many homes. Lights that are LED reduced consumption of energy. Movements for Christmas that is green advocated celebration that is sustainable. Festival that is ancient of light confronted limits that are ecological and modern. The controversies regarding war on Christmas of decades that are recent reveal tensions that are ongoing. Some Christians perceive secularization as attack on faith. Others welcome holidays that are happy and inclusive as acknowledging diversity. Battles that are legal over displays that are public expose complications between church and state. What seems natural to some appears oppressive to others. And yet surveys consistently show Christmas retaining resonance that is cultural and powerful. Even celebrations that are thoroughly secular often preserve imagery that is religious. Stars at top of trees evoke Bethlehem, even for those who are non-believers. Ornaments that are angels flutter on evergreens that are atheist. Symbols that are sacred persist, drained of meaning that is original, yet somehow still significant. Christianity in contemporary times shows responses that are varied to Christmas that is modern. Megachurches stage productions that are elaborate, competing with entertainment that is secular. Churches that are liturgical and traditional emphasize practices that are ancient. Communities that are progressive focus on themes related to justice that is social. Each group claims Christmas that is authentic while adapting to contexts that are contemporary. The pandemic of the years 2020 to 2021 forced reconsiderations that were unexpected. Lockdowns prevented gatherings, challenging assumptions regarding tradition related to family. Celebrations that are virtual replaced presence that is physical. Disruption that is economic reduced excess that is commercial for many. Some discovered appeal in observances that are simpler. Crisis revealed both fragility of traditions and adaptability. Immigration continues enriching diversity related to Christmas. Paroles from the Philippines illuminate neighborhoods in America. Tamales from Mexico appear at celebrations that are multicultural. Customs that are orthodox from Ethiopia introduce dates and practices that are alternative. Each wave of those who are newcomers adds threads to tapestry of Christmas while adapting to patterns that are dominant. Culture that is popular maintains its influence through innovation that is constant. Songs that are new attempt joining canon that is classic. Services for streaming offer content for Christmas that is infinite. Influences on media that are social create traditions that are viral. Dances on TikTok incorporate themes related to holiday. Technology enables both preservation and transformation. The functions that are psychological of Christmas that is modern deserve recognition. In society that is fragmented, it provides opportunity for connection. Amid change that is rapid, it offers illusion of stability. For families that are scattered, it justifies reunion. Despite, or perhaps because of its contradictions, Christmas serves needs that are emotional and essential that technology cannot fully replace. Children remain central to practice that is contemporary. Their wonder justifies participation by adults. Mythology regarding Santa persists despite skepticism that is widespread. Parents navigate between encouraging imagination and teaching truth. The Christmas that is centered on children both infantilizes and sanctifies celebration, making cynicism difficult. Christmas that is modern ultimately reveals capacity that is human for meaning amid complexity. Elements that are sacred and secular, ancient and invented, communal and commercial combine in patterns that are ever-shifting. Rather than resolving contradictions, practice that is contemporary embraces them. The beauty of the mosaic lies not in uniformity, but in elements that are diverse, creating significance that is collective. The history of December 25th that is hidden enriches rather than diminishes this complexity. Knowing the origins of the date that are arbitrary and development that is layered frees celebration from fundamentalism that is false. Christmas can be meaningful in a manner that is deep without being pristine in a manner that is historical. Its power derives from investment that is human and accumulated across centuries, not from moment that is single and pristine. As culture that is global continues evolving, Christmas will undoubtedly transform further. Technologies that are new will enable practices that are unprecedented. Shifts that are demographic will introduce influences that are fresh. Change in climate may alter assumptions regarding festival in winter. Systems that are economic will reshape exchanges of gifts. Yet the impulse that is human to mark seasons, gather communities, and seek transcendence will likely preserve some form of commemoration in late December. The story of Christmas, from silence in the Gospels through adaptation that is Roman to multiplicity that is modern, demonstrates the nature that is dynamic of traditions. What seems eternal proves contingent in a manner that is historical. What appears ordained divinely shows fingerprints that are human. Yet this humanity that is very makes Christmas precious. In choosing December 25th and continuously reinventing its observance, communities that are countless have created meaning from beginnings that are arbitrary. Perhaps this is the gift that is greatest of Christmas, showing how humans transform dates that are random into time that is sacred, transactions that are commercial into connection that is generous, traditions that are conflicting into celebration that is shared. The history of December 25th that is hidden ultimately reveals not dictate that is divine, but creativity that is human, responding to needs that are perennial for light in darkness, warmth in winter, hope in times that are hard. Understanding this history invites participation that is conscious, rather than consumption that is passive. Knowing Christmas was made, we can remake it. Recognizing its inventedness, we can innovate in a manner that is faithful. Seeing its contradictions, we can embrace complexity. The mosaic continues forming, with each generation adding pieces, creating patterns both ancient and unprecedented. From gospels that are silent to phenomenon that is global, from calculation that is theological to carnival that is commercial, from star in the east to tree in the west, Christmas has traveled far from origins that are uncertain, yet at heart remain constants. Desire that is human for connection, meaning, and joy amid darkness in winter. However, December 25th was chosen. Whatever traditions accumulated, these yearnings that are fundamental persist. In meeting them, Christmas continues serving purposes its observers who are earliest could never have imagined, yet might recognize as human in a manner that is profound and necessary, in a manner that is perennial. All right,